Hello, everybody. Good evening. Good evening. We're in a new building. We have a new background behind us. We have a new area. And we're excited to be in our new area. And the next time you come and visit us online, we'll have decorations on the walls as we start to unpack. So tonight we're going to talk about the word name. Name. What is a name? When God created humanity, He gave us gifts. He gave us the gift of life. Genesis tells us that He formed Adam out of the dirt. Then He breathed the breath of life into him. It was the gift of life that He gave. And then from there, we followed and gave life generation after generation after generation. God gave us the guardianship of the Garden of Eden. He had Adam and Eve in the garden. That's all in Genesis. Genesis 1. And then Genesis 2 kind of comes in and fills in the gap of what we don't know. In Genesis 1, a lot of people say that there's two creations. It's not really two creations. It's one creation with additions to it. Remember, the Bible was written by people. So what one doesn't do, the next one comes and helps fill in. He gives the gift of gender, male and female. There's a lot of male and females. There's human male and females, there's animal male and female. Plants have male and females. My neighbor told me that she had a peach tree and she had to have a male peach tree and a female one within proximity of each other so that she could have her peaches. So there's even male and female plants. My palm trees, I can always tell who the male and female are with the pods that come out and the seeds that come out. So we all know how to procreate. Procreate is to make more. We make more of ourselves. The plants make more of each other. And God, with His sense of humor, there's some fish that God definitely has a sense of humor. He gave us the stewardship of naming, of names and naming. So that's what our topic is going to be tonight, is name. You know, Debbie asked me, what is the topic? And I said, name. And she said, what, a name? And I said, no, name. And she said, I don't understand. And so we decided to put quotations around name, because the topic is name, because that is one of the gifts that God gave to humanity, and that's the ability to name. So we have to wonder, what exactly is a name? And what is name in what language? I looked up on my Google Translate, and I just kept on scrolling and scrolling and scrolling the amount of languages that we have in the world today. And each language has a different word for name. But everybody knows what name is, and God knows name in everybody's language. We don't know the word name in every language. And I'm sure the other languages don't know how to say name in English, but in their language, name means the same as it does in English or Spanish, French, whatever language that you choose as your first or as your second language. So I've told you many times that I like to look up words in the dictionary and see what our friend Webster, Merriam-Webster, has to say about defining a word. So I looked up name in the dictionary, and it's a word or phrase that constitutes distinctive designation of a person or a thing. Because we all have to understand what a word means. So if you take word name as a noun, it could be a reputation. I'm headed north in a few weeks, so when I thought of a reputation, I thought of Eminem, the rapper, because I'm north of Detroit, and Eminem actually lives in the general vicinity of where my son lives. He bought a house up there, and I don't know if he still owns it or not, but he's got a pretty nice house up there. And name can also go along with fame. And if we use Eminem as an example, he has made a name for himself in the rap industry. And it's also can be a reputation. He's made a good name for himself. So name is, it's a lot like last time when we were talking about stuff. I don't know if any of you went and looked up George Carlin and his little skit that he has on stuff. It's the same with name. It means a lot. I could put on a name tag. Our family name. Sometimes we do good with our family name. Sometimes we disgrace it. Judas, he disgraced his family name. Could you imagine his cousins, his mother? We all have a mother. We all have a father. And they don't talk about Judas's family too much in the Bible. We don't know if he ever had children. I'm sure if you actually looked it up, there would be some place that would give information about Judas, but I'm sure he definitely disgraced his family name. It could be also appearances. For example, they're a friend in name only. I have a friend who tells me that I'm a good friend, but never return phone calls or text messages or answers voicemail. So they're a friend in name only. My friend, but. And then one can be referred to by name, like Jesus. The name of Jesus, we praise and say Jesus, and he's known by name. So name has a lot of different types of meanings. And then if we look at name as a verb, you can identify something by name. This is a book. It has a name. These are papers. If I said papers, we all know, because paper, the name paper, is definitive to paper. We can name a date. Next week, Tuesday night. Next week, Wednesday. I'm going to name that day as the day that we have church at Juanita Folsom Ministries. So in Genesis 2:19, let's go over there, let's poke around in Genesis. Genesis 2:19. And out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field, every fowl of the air, and brought them to Adam to see what he would call them. And whatsoever Adam called every living creature, that was the name. So God gave Adam the ability to name all these creatures, plants, animals. Have to wonder where Adam got his vocabulary, or what his vocabulary was. What language did they speak back then? What language did God speak to Adam? We don't know that. We speak English. A lot of us speak Spanish. Very few of us speak French. I don't know of anybody who speaks German around this town, but mostly we speak English. We speak Spanish. But what did God speak when he spoke with Adam? What words? How did Adam even know to name a lizard a lizard? Was it called a lizard back then? Or a bug? I don't think they had mosquitoes in the garden. I went to a creation museum. If you ever get a chance, go up to Kentucky. They have a life-size ark up there. They used the dimensions in the Bible, and this ministry built this ark. And they figured out how Noah would be able to live that time on the ark. They have it all figured out. They even have a little section there where they could grow bugs to feed the animals, to feed the other animals, to grow the plants. That ministry, they had it all figured out. How they were going to use light, how they divided the animals up so that Noah and his family wouldn't be overwhelmed taking care of all these animals. And then next door, about 15 minutes down the road, is the Creation Museum. And they have, it's really exciting in there. But they made a comment that there's no weeds, or there were no weeds in the Garden of Eden. So whoever named weeds did it afterwards, because I don't think Adam had to deal with weeds. He might not even had to deal with mosquitoes. I don't know. That's information that we are not privy to now. But he named all this stuff. God brought something to him and said, what should we call this? And you have to wonder where Adam would have came up with the ingenuity to say, we're going to call it this, we're going to call it that. But that was one of the gifts that God gave, was to name things. But remember, we're not creators. We're regions. We're regions of names, which means God gave us the ability to name things. I have it written here somewhere. Here it is here. I guess you could call them scientists, naturalists, biologists, explorers. They're still finding new plants and animals. And we talked last week about the exploration of the ocean and how only 5% of the ocean has been explored. So if they come across a new sea creature, they'll name it. And a lot of these explorers, these scientists, they name after themselves. And when I was looking this up about a name, I thought, what would I name if I went out there poking around trying to find something new that nobody else had ever found before, a new species of something. I would call it a gamaring, and it would be, I thought it would be a little fish. It would be a gamaring fish. And from that point forward, every time somebody would see this little fish in the ocean, they would say, oh, That's the gay marring, because I took the first part of my name, the first part of my middle name, and the end of my last name, and I stuck it together, and that's what these explorers do. They put themselves into the name, and they have their genius and their species, and that would, mine would be a gay marring fish. And it's just like Bissell. We all know Bissell's vacuum cleaners. You know, that's her last name. That's the family name. So you consider your last name. My last name is Cushing. So I would have an empire that would be called Cushing, and everybody would just say, "Oh, that's the Cushing stuff," and they would be used to it because that's the name that was given to it, and that's what Adam did back in the Garden of Eden. He named all this stuff. And we can do that. God allows us to do that because we're regents. We're regents of name. We are not creators. We can't create a new species. Well, they might be now the dark side of life. They're doing some scandalous stuff now with DNA and splitting molecules and things that they don't want, they being the scientists. They're probably like mad scientists like we saw in the cartoons where they're running around in their little beakers and they're doing things they shouldn't be doing. There's possibility that they're creating new species, but they shouldn't be because there is one creator. And again, we're all going to end up standing in front of God someday. And I don't really want to answer questions like, why did you do what you weren't supposed to do? I just don't really want to answer those questions. And those people should actually be considering that too, but that doesn't have anything to do with names. As a regent of names, regent means regal. Born into royalty, doesn't God tell us that we're royalty in his eyes? It's a person appointed too, so he gives us the permission to name things. It's a pro tempore, that's Latin. It's Latin for the time being. He tells us pro tempore, for the time being, you can name stuff, name new species that you might find, a new plant. Now there's people out there in the Amazon poking around right now, finding new plant species, new spiders, new bugs, insects, things like that. So we're able to name. We're able to prophetically speak out what God tells us to speak out. We're able to name out a person's destiny. Remember, God takes you prophetically. He'll take you to the future. He'll show you, and then he'll bring you back to the present. And you have the ability to walk through to the future that God has for you. It's named. He names these instances for us so that we have something to look forward to, something to walk towards, something to say, God promised me this and someday I will have it. And we all have that. We all know. And if you don't know, then my suggestion would be to seek it out, find out what your purpose is. He gives us the responsibility to lead our children, to name our children, to show them the ways of God the best that we can. collaborate with the Holy Spirit to reach our calling, to make it through the gateways into our calling. God even speaks out, I know you by name. He says that to us. He said it to us in Isaiah, Jeremiah, John, Exodus. Let's look up Isaiah. This one was a good one. If I can find Isaiah on here. Isaiah 43:1. 43:1. But now thus saith the Lord that created thee, O Jacob, that he that formed thee, O Israel, fear not, for I have redeemed thee. I have called thee by name. Thou art mine. So he put a seal on them. He put a seal on you. He calls you by name. So you don't have to really fret too much. Not when God has you in his sights. Let's look at Jeremiah. Jeremiah 1:5. Before I formed thee in the belly, we've talked about this one numerous times. I like this one. Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. Because he puts your name on your mother's heart. The name that she named you is the name that he wanted you to be named. I knew a lady one time, her name was Lauren, but she wanted to be called Sue. So we all called her Sue. But if she looked up what Lauren meant, she would have rather been called Lauren, because that's the name, according to Jeremiah 1:5, that's the name that God wanted her to have. Let's look in the New Testament. Let's look at John. John 10:3. John 10, verse 3. To him the porter opened, and the sheep hear his voice. And he calleth his own sheep by name, and he leadeth them out. We're his sheep. I did a talk years ago on sheep. Maybe I'll do that one again, because that one explains perfectly why God calls us his sheep. But he calls, and they hear him, and they follow, just like he calls us, and we hear him, and we follow. So these are all credible sources that give. We've talked numerous times about credibility. The Bible gives us credibility, that there's truth here. How about Exodus? Let's go to Exodus 33:17. And the Lord said to Moses, I will do this thing also that thou hast spoken, for thou hast found grace in my sight, and I know thee by name. So Moses has a name. We know where Moses came from. Last week we talked about where Moses came from and his family tree. And God says, I knew you by name. I know thee by name. So Moses didn't have to go hiding any place. I found a little piece. A couple weeks back, we talked about credible sources. We talked about people who know information and they write it down, and they've researched it. And this came out of a book called Personal Names in Anthropology. And this says, anthropologists have not found a single society which does not use personal names in some form. They are all human universal. However, the forms of these names take and the ways in which they are bestowed and used vary between cultures. So names are used all over the place. Every culture, they have a name for something, because how do you talk if you don't have a name for something? You can't point and just say, ugh. When we speak words, we speak the name for it. Would you get the chair for me? Would you get a glass of water? If you said, would you get a glass of water? We all know you're going to go get a glass and you're going to put water in it. But if you just point, that's as bad as when somebody says, it's just over there. And I remember a lady telling me, it's just over there. Where? Well, it's just over there. I know, but where? Where over there? Can you give me some clues? Can you name something? Well, over there happened to have been like 3 miles down the road to the left, and then you turn right and left again. And I'm supposed to know this, but if she would have said, if you go 3 miles down the road, turn left at the stop sign, turn right at the next stop sign, I would have found it, because she's naming things. And without names, and in every culture, there's a culture out there that they click. That's how they communicate, they click. And even they have the ability to name things with their language. That's why I was wondering, I wonder what language God and Adam used. Now, Jesus, he spoke Aramaic. They don't even speak Aramaic anymore. Nobody does. It's a lost language. But yet we have Bibles that have continued. We did our study about Bibles a couple of weeks back. And all of those names that they put in the Bible have been translated from language to language to language. And that is, I would consider it would be miraculous all by itself, to be able to translate from a language that has a lot of words into a language that has a very few words, because there's languages that don't have as many words as English. And there's languages that have different dialects. Even English does. I knew a man from Kentucky one time. He was very Southern, and he lived next door to me, and he was talking about coil, and I'm listening to him and trying to figure out what he's talking about. And when I heard coil, I'm thinking about a big spool with like cable coil on it, and use a high-low and lift it up, put it on a truck and transport it around, and then the utility guys will take it and put the wires up. And I thought that, you know, what he was telling me about was the coal trucks. Dialect, words. Actually, I think I remember, if I remember right, I made him spell it so that I could understand what he was saying. So it's names, it's a name. And if you don't know what the name is, you're not going to know what somebody's saying. Some names aren't given, like Potiphar's wife. Remember Potiphar's wife, Joseph? Joseph was over there doing his thing. He was working away, minding his own business, and Potiphar's wife comes in. We don't know what her name is. She had a name. Her husband knew her name. Joseph knew her name. Her friends knew her name, her family. But she's going to go down in history as Potiphar's wife. And we won't know what her name is. But she was somebody, and she had a name. But we don't know that. And look at Prince. We all know Prince. He, gosh, it's going to be about 4, 5, 6 years. It's been a while since he died. He decided one day he didn't want to be called Prince anymore, so he comes up with this symbol. And he
Can you turn it off, baby? Can you turn off your phone, baby?
he gave us a symbol, and it had stuff on it, and what did we all call him? The artist formerly known as Prince, because you can't speak out a symbol. You have to speak out a name. So whatever his issue was, that he didn't want to be called Prince anymore. But think about what it would be like not to have a name. To be without a name is to be without the possibility of being known. At least even with Prince, with his symbol, we knew that he was Prince. And Potiphar's wife, even though we don't know what her first name is, she was identified. But what about being without a name? How are you going to be known? Satan is not a name. It is a referral to, if that makes sense. Over the centuries, people have changed things. It's easier for us to name the greatest adversary that we have in our lives than to know that Satan doesn't have a name. The name, it's a title. He has a title, and it's the adversary, the enemy, the opponent, the opposition. It's actually in Hebrew, it means the adversary. I remember that the Bible was written so many years ago. If I recall what I have in my papers, 1,300 years ago? No, it was more than that. No, it was 1,300 years that it took to write the Bible. I'd have to go back and look at my papers. And back then, God was more prominent in people's lives. Over the century, we've kind of put him on the back seat. We have dismissed him as not being real. We have distorted the things of God. But back then, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Noah, Adam. I mean, God came down and had conversations with those people. He walked with Adam. He fought with Abraham. He gave directions to Noah. He spoke with Moses. And when we take into consideration taking a language and transcribing it to a different language, there's going to be a distortion there all along, but it stays true. It still stays true. So to truly understand what the Bible does say about Satan and spiritual warfare, we do need to understand that the Bible and the original authors and readers, we have to understand their perspective. And there are people out there that have dissected the Bible and understand it in the Hebrew and the Greek and the original languages of the ancients to try and understand what was being said, what the message is. And the devil's name is not, it's not a name, it's a description. So is it that important to put such authority onto a word, a name, that isn't really even a name? It's actually kind of sad that there is a being that has no name and no place. Even the angels, they have names, Michael, Gabriel. God named the angels. I'm sure when he calls to them by name. Satan is a transliteration of a Hebrew word. And the Hebrew word for adversary or opponent, because he is our adversary, he is our opponent. The word Satan is used multiple times in the Old Testament. It's used in the New Testament too. It's referred to anyone who is blocking or challenging someone else. Even Jesus, Matthew, he says it in Matthew, Satan, get behind me, for you an offense to me are not the ways of God, but the ways of the world. He's saying, the adversary, my opponent, you go. Go sit down. You who has no name. And transliteration, it's a type of a conversion of a text from one script to another. That's what we're talking about, a language that has a lot of words transcribed into a language that has few words. Swapping letters of a word, understanding the context of a sentence. Some of us say, I'm going to the store. Somebody else might say, the store is where I'm going. Somebody else might say, I must be going to get groceries. It's the same thing. We're all going to the store. But we say it differently. And that's what transliteration is. To say the same thing of a name, but in a different way. Because Lucifer, the words, the name, it didn't really exist before the 16th century. But over time, it was put into our language. Belial is another title. The worthless, that one is a tongue twister. The worthless one. Satan has a lot of words that are not positive. Names that we wouldn't want to be called. To have a name, to be named, to be known by your name is a cherished gift. It's something that each one of us knows and wants. I brought my name book. It's called The Name Book. And it's by Dorothy Astoria. And it's full of names. I look up my name. My name is Gail, and it means my Father rejoices, and it means lively. And my Bible passage is, the Lord your God in your midst, the mighty one will save, he will rejoice over you with gladness. So my name has meaning. We have Karen here with us. Let's look up Karen. Karen is Nehemiah, do not sorrow, for the joy of the Lord is your strength. Karen's name has meaning. It's important to her and every other Karen out there too. We have Debbie here with us, which would be Deborah. Deborah is Isaiah, for behold, I create new heavens and a new earth, and the former shall not be remembered or come to mind. Debbie's name has meaning. It's important. Don't put importance on Satan's name. He is not. He is the opponent. He does not need to be capitalized. Juanita is here. She goes into Ezekiel. Your fame spread among the nations on account of your beauty, for it was perfect because my splendor that I had bestowed on you. God is gracious. Spanish origin. Her name has meaning. The nameless one has nothing to give us, even with the tempting promises. You should actually feel sorry for those people that will take the temptation over taking the tests. Wouldn't it be easier to just do what it is you have to do in the short amount of time that we're here to live out an eternity with God? We don't know what heaven's going to be like. Billy Graham said it was going to be like something that we've never experienced before, that we can't even comprehend. But it sure is better to do whatever it is that God wants us to do, the trials, tribulations, the tests, the walking through the gateways to get into our calling, than it is to take the easy way out and accept the tempting promises that are putting in front of us. There is no future, no destiny, no calling for someone who doesn't have a name. It's not a good thing. So know what a name is. Know why you have a name, why you've been named, what a name means, why names are important. Figure out if you ever have the opportunity and you come across a new species in life, what name would you call it? That your name would go down in the scientific community's history as naming a new frog or a new spider or a new plant or something. It's fun to sit there and think about what you're going to do. I'm going on vacation, so I'll be back at the beginning of July. And I think what we'll do is I read a book called The Art of War, and it teaches us how to be warriors. So we'll look and see why we need to be warriors in today's world. So go look up your name if you have the name book, or if you want your name looked up, put a comment on the Facebook comment section, and we'll type in what your name means so you know going forward who you are in God's eyes. And don't forget about Juanita Folsom Ministries.com, Juanita's page, PayPal account. There's a link there, you can click it, or go to your checkbook, and Juanita Folsom, P.O. Box 66, Lake
No,
Placid.
44.
Sorry, 44, I don't have the paper in front of me. P.O. Box 44, Lake Placid, Florida 23862. And I will see you back in July.